Welcome, everyone. Looks like we have folks still filtering in, so we'll give them just one more minute and then we will get started today. Appreciate everyone being here. Right. Well, I think we'll let folks filter in as their schedule allows, but we'll get started here today. Just wanted to welcome everyone into today's webinar on automating utility data collection with Salesforce AI. We'll go on a complete end-to-end walkthrough of taking utility bills, your PDFs, your images, handwritten notes, etc., and turning them into clean, validated records in Salesforce. The process that we'll demonstrate today includes three key components: prompt templates for the AI extraction piece, Apex to structure the outputs from the AI models, and Flow to orchestrate the process. By the end of this hour, you'll understand how to build this process for yourself and automate what many of our clients find to be a manual and often error-prone process. So this is definitely a real-world problem that we at Green Impact, who are working with customers every day and helping them on their sustainability journey. And one of the big elements is data ingestion. This solution is one that we found to be really powerful, especially if you build it out to some of the more automated ingestion capabilities that we'll cover today. So excited to have everyone here, and we will get started. So let's first take a look at the agenda for today. So once again, we'll take a complete end-to-end journey from raw file all the way to a created Salesforce record. We will be focusing on net zero cloud records today, but the principles and patterns that we'll talk through are not limited to that use case. So if you're wanting to ingest other types of documents for other purposes, you could certainly apply these concepts. So we will start with the introduction and architecture. In this section, we will talk through design principles as well as some of the prerequisites in terms of licensure and permissions that you need. We'll then start getting into the actual components of the process. So we'll talk through intake methods, how to capture the files. Then we'll talk through prompt templates. What are the types of prompts that you need to build to extract the data from your files? Then we'll move to the actual orchestration and structure of the data with Apex and Flow. And finally, we'll talk through how you should build this process and what considerations you should put into it in terms of review and governance to ensure the data that is being extracted is accurate and complete. And finally, we'll end with a live demonstration of the process end to end, and we'll end with Q&A. So please feel free to raise a hand or ask questions. I may not be able to stop in real time, but we will open up at the end for any questions that do come up. So once again, appreciate everyone's time today, and let's get started. So moving into introduction and architecture, this process is one that we found to be a reliable four-step pattern, starting with classify and ending with commit. So let's break that down into each of the individual steps. The first step being classify. What that is essentially identifying and classifying the type of document being processed. In our workflow that we'll take a look at today, we are anticipating bills of different types, specifically energy versus water versus waste, and we have prompts to actually do that classification. The second step is the actual extraction of the data. So what that entails is, the passing a file into an AI model with instructions and pulling out the data points that we're looking for. We will be looking for primarily the key data points that you need to insert a net zero cloud record today. However, you can customize these prompts and customize the Apex behind the scenes to extract as much or as little data as you'd like. So that really does cover extract and parse. Extract is really the AI side. Parse is the Apex side to actually handle that extraction. And then ultimately, there's the commitment of that data, saving the data to the Salesforce database. So really, this 4-step process gives you the consistency that you would hope to expect out of automating utility bill extraction or any other normally manual process. So before we get into the actual components, I want to talk through the process itself in a little more detail, and then we'll talk about licensure, and then we'll start talking about the actual components here. So let's move to the next slide. So this process flow gives you a sense of the end-to-end architecture that we'll be looking at throughout this presentation, as well as the demonstration here. But just moving left to right across the process flow, we start with the intake paths or the ingestion methods. These aren't the only possible options. In theory, there could be other ways to get files into Salesforce, but the three that we'll be focusing on today is manual upload, email intake, and API intake. We'll cover all of those in detail a little bit later. But the point of those processes is really just how does the file get into Salesforce. But what's important to realize is regardless of that intake method, flow is going to pick up those files regardless of method. So flow is the orchestrator that will pull together the AI elements, pull together the programmatic elements, and ultimately ensure that you're inserting clean, accurate, complete data throughout the process. So as we walk through, once the flow is kicked off, based on a file being entered into Salesforce, the first thing that will happen is it will create a log record. This log record goes to the governance side of things that we'll talk about later. But essentially, this will log that a file was received, and it will stay in essentially a received status until we move to the classify prompt, where we will determine what type of file that we have received, whether that in our instance is energy, water, or waste. Then if we have a successful classification, we'll move to extraction. Once again, an AI prompt saying, give me X fields from this document. And if successful, we'll proceed to actual insertion of the record. But the prompts, and as you may expect, AI, as good as you can, write a prompt, you do need some programmatic elements to actually structure the output. So we are writing the prompt to extract specific JSON points with specific confidence levels, and assuming those are received by Apex in an expected fashion, this decision in the flow will determine whether, one, we proceed with inserting a bill and closing out our log essentially, or updating our log record with an error or with a confidence score or what have you to say, hey, someone needs to take a look at this file. So end to end, you drop a file, the AI classifies and extracts it, Apex will structure it, and then we will determine if a record is inserted or not. So this process, once again, is essentially eliminating the, if you have members of your team entering utility bills, or if you're putting things into CSV and loading them, this essentially eliminates that process. In theory, makes it much more cost efficient, much more reliable. And the nice thing is as we'll see later, all of the source data, if you will, the file itself is then linked to the record that was created from it. So you get all of the benefits of automation and efficiency with the auditability of, if your auditors say, where did this number come from? The file is sitting right there next to the record. So before we get into, apologies, the actual components, once again, I just want to touch I want to touch on licensing and permissions. So, as we've mentioned, a part of this process is using AI in Salesforce. So just looking at the licensing checklist on the left-hand side, Data Cloud is required essentially for all AI or agentic use cases. You don't necessarily have to purchase an entire Data Cloud SKU and do all, purchase that entire project, but it is the underlying architecture for most, if not all, of the AI functionality within Salesforce. So that will need to be enabled, and then you will also need to have generally flex credits purchased to use Prompt Builder, and that's a whole like conversation in itself. But what I will call out is and what's probably, if you're new to using AI in Salesforce, is Salesforce offers a program called Foundations that gives you access to a ton of different features and functionality, but it does give you that initial Data Cloud access, as well as a one-time distribution of the credits that you would need to run the models. So it gives you the ability to essentially, at no cost to you, pilot a program like this or any AI functionality that you're considering. And then once you vetted it and make sure it works for you, then you can expand usage, and you're paying essentially for the usage moving forward. So if you haven't jumped off in terms of using Salesforce AI, I would definitely recommend starting with Salesforce Foundations, and then working with your AE or purchasing credits once you've vetted your use cases. In terms of everything else on the list here, Prompt Builder gives you the ability to select models that come with Salesforce or with the AI functionality. So unless you're a really robust organization that's building your own models, which more power to you, you will have the ability to select from the OpenAI, Gemini, et cetera, within the Prompt Builder. Flow and Apex, as well as email services, as long as you're using Enterprise or above, are going to just come with your licensure. But the last licensing item to call out is, we are focusing on Net Zero Cloud today. If you are looking to insert data into Net Zero Cloud or any other destination cloud, you will just need to be licensed for that. So probably implied, but just calling it out as a separate SKU or separate item on the checklist. So that's licensure. On the right-hand side, for permissions, so essentially build will likely have to be mostly an admin function. Author, Apex, manage flow, customize application are generally going to be admin functionality. But that doesn't mean that business users, for our use case here today, let's call it a sustainability manager. That's not to say that sustainability managers cannot at least participate in writing the prompts that get created in Prompt Builder. And we'll see examples of those later today. It's just, what does the text look like? What are you telling the system to extract, et cetera? So I do think while the actual creation of the components will likely be an admin function, and you'll need to coordinate with your admins or your IT team, the logic and what fields you extract and the language of the prompts can be collaborative between the business and IT, or sustainability and IT. In terms of users being able to actually run the prompts and extract the data, you need a prompt template user, which is a permission set. You need run flows, and then you need the ability to essentially create the records that the objects that you're looking to insert, whether that be, in our use case, an energy use record or a water activity. And you also need the ability to manage files. So most folks, I would imagine, that are Net Zero Cloud users are going to have these last three flows: CRUD access and the ability to upload files. However, the prompt template user is likely something that you're going to have to set up if you don't have any of the AI functionality purchased prior to starting on this journey. We'll talk about this later, but if you are planning to use email services use email services, there are some additional permissions, and email services are essentially one of those ingestion models or methods that we'll talk about on the next slide. So if we think about our process flow that we looked at a few slides ago, we have really three methods that we'll focus on today. I think the email service is likely the unless you have a utility aggregator or some sort of database that has the files that you're looking to insert into NetZero Cloud or Salesforce in general, which is an option, and an API is a possibility. Email service is a great goal to set in terms of complete automation. And the way that an email service works is Salesforce you can set this up from setup, but it will essentially create a unique address that you can send email with attachments to. And sitting behind it is an Apex class that you would need to work with your IT team to configure or program. But essentially all we're looking to do is create an Apex class that takes the file out of any inbound email and kicks it into the flow that we saw on the last few slides. So this is a little bit programmatic, but what this allows you to do is you can take that email address that is created by Salesforce. Anything received by that will be kicked into Salesforce and into the flow that we build, and then you can put it behind a branded email address. Let's call it utilitybills@yourorganization.com, something like that. And then tell your, whoever is collecting the data, or even, send if you get utility bills directly from your vendors, send all of those to that address, and sitting behind that email address will be that flow that will just pick up the files and process them automatically. So that is a bit of a lift up front, but it is, sort of the complete automation if you don't have a database of all of the files that you would want to use for utility calculation. The method that we'll cover today is the screen flow upload, essentially manual upload. And this is good for demonstration. And it does eliminate, once again, even though there is a user manually uploading a file, it does in theory eliminate the, hey, I hit 10,000 kilowatt hours instead of 1,000 kilowatt hours. So there is the advantage from an accuracy standpoint and a time invested standpoint from the end user. And then once again, API is an option. We have some customers that once again do have databases or data lakes or what have you, storing all of their utility bills. Every organization is likely going to be different on that point, but you can certainly integrate if you have the backend systems to do so. So once again, regardless of intake method, all of them will end up in the flow, and you can pick and choose. If you want to offer both the screen flow upload and the email service, there's not anything prohibiting you from doing so. And if you want to start with one and move to another, that's certainly an option as well. So let's move into the actual prompts themselves. So once again, we have two prompts in our workflow. The first one is our utility bill sorter. So the logic that we built out, or I built out for this demonstration, is really just asking a prompt to ask the model to say, what type of bill did we receive? And it includes the signals to look for energy versus water versus waste, and it outputs essentially a classification of one of those bill types that the flow downstream can use to route to the correct extraction prompts, because our prompts are going to be different if we're extracting a waste bill versus a water bill versus an energy bill. So that this bill is a prerequisite to the extract data bill or extract data prompt that once again is specific to the utility bill type. It requests in the prompt that the prompt return structured JSON. And if you're not familiar with JSON, that's essentially just a structured programming language that Apex or code can consume reliably out of the prompt. So we'll see later that we will define what fields we're looking for. We will tell it not to return any explanation of anything. just give us this JSON in this format for these specific fields. And that is what the Apex and the flow downstream will look for. So we're going to classify using the utility bill sorter. Then we're going to route to the correct extraction prompt, and it will return, ideally, the JSON of the bill, which will include all of our data like account number, consumption amount, dates, etc. We do also have confidence scores built into some of this logic, so we'll see later. You can route your logic however you'd like based on how confident the LLM is in one or all of the fields that were extracted. We'll touch on some design principles throughout this, but it is important to call out that you could, in theory, write all of this into one large prompt, but it makes it difficult to understand where things are breaking down or failing. So this gives you kind of clear steps in the process to understand if something is unsuccessful, where does that happen, and then ultimately, writing to JSON gives you the output schema, something reliable that you can, insert into a, structured object like an energy use or a water activity. So if we look at our next slide here, this is, essentially the orchestration and, what do we do with the data that's extracted from AI? So for all of our bill types, energy use, water, waste, we have what's called a wrapper class. Just think of this as, strongly defined fields that we're expecting the AI to produce. So we tell the prompt, hey, here is a file. Here are the files that we'd like you to extract, and here's the format that you'd like to output that in. The Apex sitting in the next step, or the code sitting in the next step, is looking for that exact format. And if it doesn't receive it reliably, our log record will, be updated with errors. So this gives us the structure to actually insert a record downstream. And then the JSON parser, sits behind that and actually interprets, the data that's put into the wrapper itself. So this is, fairly light. I understand this can seem like a fair amount of, there is programmatic or are programmatic elements to this. They are fairly light logically. The AI prompts are handling most of the functionality. But the reality is having that structure provided by the Apex is important to ensure reliability and consistency in inserting your data. And then ultimately, the flow, once again, is just kind of harnessing and orchestrating everything along the way. It is the recipient or receiving point of the files. It will call things in order and then ensure that either we insert a record or we update our logs accordingly. So this is really the underlying thread under the entire process. And then we'll talk just a little bit here about review and governance. So we've got essentially a custom object that is created, once again, at the point of file ingestion. We receive a file, and the first thing we do before we do anything else is create that log record to identify that the file was created. That is our receive status. Then as it starts the classification process, it will move to processing. And then ultimately, one of three statuses will occur. Either it will be processed, and that it essentially implies that everything was extracted as expected, and we created whatever record type we were expecting. Needs review, which is, hey, we did actually create a record, or we got information that was expected, but we're unsure, the AI or the model is unsure of whether it's valid, and there's a status for needs review. And then there is similarly, but more of a red error instead of a yellow error or a yellow flag, is the error status where, for example, if the AI doesn't return the structured JSON, or if we attempt to insert a record and we get some sort of validation error or some other error from Salesforce, anything else that is essentially a hard error will go into this error status. And all of this is reportable in that custom object, and you can, in theory, create custom UI, etc., for anybody who is responsible for reviewing these yellow or red errors. And that it is a little bit cut off down here, but That's that a human in the loop console. It can be as simple as a report or a list view, and you could theoretically make it much more robust if you had the interest or need. So once again, just important when you're talking about ingestion and talking about data that's going to be audited, you want to just have a process to understand when things fail. And if an auditor asks, where did this come from? Once again, you have the file, you have the record, and the log records will actually have the JSON that was extracted. So you have end to end from file to record the entire provenance of where that data came from. And then finally, our last couple slides before we get into the demonstration here. So this is not anything that we will demonstrate today, but it is likely necessary for some of the ingestion types. And if you wanted to make this a more robust or even more accurate process, you would want to consider some of these items. So the first one is account supplier mapping. So think of this as, every bill in theory is going to have an account number, and you're going to need to link in Net Zero Cloud every bill to a stationary asset. It is a systematic prerequisite. A utility meter does not exist without the building it's linked to or that it's physically tied to. But when you're uploading as an end user, you can go to the stationary asset, as we'll see shortly, and do the upload right there. And the context of that record is passed into the process. The account supplier mapping essentially allows you to link a stationary asset to a supplier and an account number to say, if we get a bill via email for account number 12345, we can go and query for that mapping and say, what is account, query for account number 12345 and find the supplier and find the stationary asset that it should be tied to. So this is just essentially underpinning or infrastructure for automating if you want to do that email ingestion process. The next two are, once again, more about making the AI extraction more reliable. So in addition to the supplier mapping, you can, in theory, add instructions that are specific to the supplier's bills. So the prompts that we'll see today are generic. They are universal. They are, hey, we need these fields, and they do a pretty good job of it. But the reality is if you had instruction like kilowatt hours is stored on page 2 in a table, and dates, use these dates for this bill type. The better information that you can provide or instruction that you can provide an AI model, the better the extraction is going to be. And you can make that supplier specific. And then ultimately, this is probably more robust and mature. But if you think about that review process we just talked about, you could continue, you could begin gathering feedback from the users that are reviewing either the needs review or the errors and saying, oh no, this field is correct, or whatever resolution they came up with, and you can feed that into the prompt as well, so that in theory we have our universal prompt. Then if you have supplier specific information inserted into that prompt, what to look for on a specific supplier's bill, and then you also finally have the context of what has failed in the past with, any bill or this supplier specific bills. So not to say that you need to do this, but it is, if you find yourself wanting to get more accurate, you could certainly, or automated, I guess, you can certainly pursue any or all of these optimizations. So I will just quickly here kind of tee us up for our demonstration, and then we'll jump into Net Zero Cloud. So the first thing that we'll walk through is the utility bill, our manual upload, if you will, ingestion method. We'll drop a file, we'll see the screen flow, we'll walk through that, we'll look at the records that get created, and then we'll also take a look behind the scenes, first looking at the flow canvas. What happened when we drop that file? What happens in the classification prompt? And then essentially walk through the process behind the scenes to give you a sense of, once again, not only what the end user sees, but what would need to be set up to make all of this happen. And then finally, at the end, we can open it up for Q&A or any thoughts before we sign off today. So at this point, I will jump over to my demo org here. And once again, as I mentioned, in the manual upload context, I'm going to start from a stationary asset, and that is going to be passed into this screen flow over on the right here. If you are sending an email and it doesn't have that context, then you need to build that account supplier mapping to support that automation. But anyways, to kind of demonstrate how simple and straightforward this process is for the end user, this is a screen flow. You could place it anywhere on the page. You could place it on a home page, on a lightning page. You could have it so that this is the only thing that a person sees when they log in. Really, the options are endless in terms of where you place this and the language that you use. The point, or the most important thing, is that you have some sort of file upload element on the screen. So I will click that upload files button, and then I'll just select a bill here, and it will give me the standard out of the box upload files screen that if you're used to Salesforce, you're used to seeing. And then if I click next here, what it's doing behind the scenes, just thinking of our process flow, is first creating our log record, and second, it's going to try to classify the file that we just uploaded. So this screen is not absolutely necessary, but it is nice for demo purposes, and it is valuable if you do want a second level of human validation. So what happened? Once again, create log record, classify the document, and we've got a couple things that were output from the model. The first thing is the detected type. It detected that this is an energy bill. This is a real light bill from our local provider, and it even tells me what provider it is. So I can, at this point, either confirm my document type is energy, or I could select another type. If you're not worried about this secondary validation, you can certainly just take this step out of the process. But just to give you a sense of break in the process, and between classification and extract, this screen gives you what the AI classified the document as. If you're a flow nerd like me, Salesforce Flow, this PDF preview or file preview component is really powerful. We'll see it throughout this demonstration, but it just gives you the ability to visualize a document on a record page or anywhere else that you would want it, and it is out of the box, no code needed. You just pass in a file ID and it displays it. So pretty exciting stuff in terms of new enhancements with Flow. So all I did was just clicked run extraction. So we had our breakpoint at classify, and now it's going to go out and extract, and it looks like we had a successful extraction. So this will give me a link to the record that was actually created. Before I open that, I want to take a look at the log records that get created as well. So we can see in this example here, this is a document processing log record, just a custom object. It's got a name like any other Salesforce object, but what's really important is the status here shows as processed. We've got an overall confidence score of the file itself, how confident the model was in extracting the file, and then it also has the details of how confident it is in each field that we told it to extract. We'll see, what we told it to do in the prompt shortly. But this gives you, what confidence level, and then also the values that it extracted. So we can see account number, once again, account supplier linking, powerful tool for that. And then all of the hard, fast, data points that you need to insert a record. What is the fuel type? How much fuel was used? What unit was it in? And then what are the timeframes that apply to that usage? So this is, the bare bones in terms of inserting a record, but you could certainly ask it to extract more, maybe cost or anything else you'd want to pull out of your data. So let's go back to, so that's the log element or record that gets created and tracks the file throughout the process. If we go back to our extraction flow and click view record, it will take me to the stationary asset energy use that just got created. And we can see here, once again, we've got our bill here. So if you have auditors or if you need to validate anything, you don't have to go look for this file. It's right there in front of you. You can validate everything here. But you can see that it extracted 761.064, which on this bill you can see is right there. It extracted the dates, and all of the standard net zero cloud fields are here. All of the converted from whatever your selected unit to the converted units are. But all of the details that we saw in that JSON output on the log record are inserted into the correct fields on the net zero cloud record. So before we get into what happened behind the scenes here, I hope it's fairly clear that one, I've belabored this process. Like if you are a person that who has part of your role is collecting utility data, this could be a 5-second file drop. You log in, you drop the file, you move on with your day, and you don't have to worry about keying in data or stepping through screens or anything of that nature. It's a win-win for the end user as well as the sustainability team who's relying on data to be complete and accurate. So now that we've kind of seen the end user's perspective here, before I get into the flows, I just want to I want to demonstrate or at least touch on that email service component. So I won't dig into the Apex class, but this is an email service record and setup. All you need to worry about is the fact that there's an Apex class that will essentially take a file and put it into the flow that we'll see shortly. There's a name. You can define what domains are allowed to send email to that address. If you want to constrain, or add security around who can email this address. And then ultimately, this is that big long address I told you probably want to hide behind, like utility bills or sustainability or what have you at yourorganization.com. But just food for thought. We won't demonstrate the email service today, but it is a powerful tool for automating this process beyond file upload. So I'll pause there really quick, and we can get into the flow here. So this is the exact same screen flow that we just walked through from an end user standpoint. We can see, and I won't click into each of these elements, but we can see logically that our flow very much mirrors the process flow I demonstrated in the slide deck earlier. So the first thing we see is our upload file screen. That is this right here. It's just asking for a file. And then the next three things that happen are, one, we get the details of the file that was uploaded. This just gives us the context of that file. We create that log record and we link the file to the log so that there's a connection between the log record and the file that was uploaded. You'll see these throughout. If you're not familiar with flow or flow building, fault paths are just a best practice anytime you're doing what's called a DML statement. Anytime you're inserting or updating a record in Salesforce, they have the potential to fail for any number of reasons. So you want to have a path to say, what do I do if this inadvertently or unexpectedly fails? And in most instances in these flows, what we're going to do is we're going to write an error to that log record that was created. That's why we create it first. So anytime anything fails, we write back to that record, and we will log whatever the error was in addition to the error status. So just gives us some control. And once that happens, at the very end, there is an error screen also telling the user, hey, this didn't work for whatever reason. So the next step is the classified document subflow. And you'll notice that we're using subflows. And the reason for this is subflows are reusable. So this is a screen flow, as we saw demonstrated. But if I wanted to set up that email services process, I could, in theory, reuse these subflows in an auto-launched flow that the email handler will call, and I don't have to rebuild everything from scratch. I can just reuse these subflows. So if I click a tab over, I've got that subflow opened up, and what the screen flow does is passes the file details into the subflow. And the first thing we're going to do is call our utility bill sorter action. This is essentially calling the prompts to tell us what type of bill was uploaded. So if we then jump over to our prompt, and I won't read all of this word for word, but the principle is that inside of Salesforce's prompt builder, you essentially have, the prompt interface, what you want the model to do. You can also set up, what model you want to use. And the only thing that's relevant for this conversation is you need to make sure that if you're starting to use this, specifically for this purpose, that you're using a model that has an input type that allows PDFs and/or images, depending on what. Typically, it's going to be a bill, a PDF, or an image. But you want to make sure that your model that you select does support the file types you're expecting to use. I've just been using AI GPT-4 Mini. It doesn't matter. You probably want to test it out just to figure out if you get better success from different models. Point being is you've got your properties where you set your model. In this instance, the only thing that I am inputting into the flow or into the prompt is the file. So in that subflow, we pass the file into this prompt, and then the prompt just says you are a routing classifier for utility bill documents. It essentially gives it a role and tells it what we're looking for it to do, and then it also tells it, okay, here are the types of bills that we can expect. Here is what to do if you can't identify what type of bill it is. Set the bill type to unknown. And then you can also give it instructions about how to identify each of these bill types. So for example, natural gas, you'd look for natural gas service, etc. What units to use. Electricity, similarly, that's a fairly straightforward one. We'll look for kilowatt hours or kWh. And water, same concept. Just telling the model what to look for to identify what type of bill we received. And then we tell it, we want exactly this output schema. So we want you to tell us exactly one of these options and one of these routing, text strings, essentially. And this will be used later on in the second flow to determine which extract prompt we use. So all of this, this is what we're expecting out of the prompt. And you can tailor this however you see fit. This is just, what I've built out. But, I would definitely trial and error test this out. But this has been a pretty powerful prompt for us. And then once it does that extraction, assuming that it is successful, it will pass all of those expected outputs, that JSON schema, into the Apex action, which is, that wrapper class that's just waiting for a specific format. It will assign the classification, and then we'll return to our primary screen flow logic. Now, all that's going to happen is it's going to use a decision to say, did we succeed in extracting or classifying our document? And all we'll look for is, was it successful, yes or no? And if it succeeded, we'll move to that classification screen we saw, where we saw it was an energy bill and the provider was Duquesne Light. Or if it failed, we'll go to error and it will tell the user, hey, this failed for whatever reason. Once again, the review classification step is not needed. If you just wanted this to be fully automated, we could kick it straight to the extract and create record subflow, which we'll dive into in just a second. And then ultimately, if that is successful, we will move to the success screen, which gives the user that view record and lets them navigate to the record that was created. So moving to our extract and create record screen, this is way more intimidating looking than it actually is. If I zoom out here, all this is a giant branch, a tree, if you will, based on what type or what classification was received out of that classify prompt. So we're passing in the file, we're passing in the stationary asset because we need that context to insert an energy use or a water or a waste record. We need both of these things to insert a record. And then ultimately, we're going to have a decision to say what was the build type that was classified. I'm belaboring this. All of this is automated. All of this is not me thinking about it as a human or as a user. It's all happening behind the scenes. So all I did as an end user was drop that file. So if we look at the water path or waste path, all of these paths will look exactly the same. The only difference is the prompts and the Apex wrapper classes are different because we're expecting different data. So all of them will start with the extract prompt and then the Apex class, and then if both of those are successful, it will proceed with the creation of whatever record we're looking to create. So we'll just follow the energy path for the sake of this conversation, but once again, just keep in mind, it's just going to follow whatever path is specific to the build type. So let's take a look at our extract energy use prompt. So this is different than our utility bill sorter, although the UI is the same. But you can see that we're following a somewhat similar model of, first and foremost, we give the prompt a role or a goal. What is it looking to do? What are we asking for it to do? Then we provide it some level of detailed instruction. But ultimately, what it breaks down to is we are asking it to extract these fields. And these are the fields that we saw in the log record. And first and foremost, it's account number, it's fuel type. And you want to be deliberate with certain field types. So for pick lists, you'll want to provide it. And you could get creative, like querying schema and all that. If you're sharp, certainly can do that, but or if you have custom fuels, you'll want to customize this. But we're telling the model, hey, here are the possible fuel types and the exact API names to use. So for example, electricity is what we found. It's going to use that value for fuel type. We also tell it what specific date formats we want to use, and we also give it, once again, for fuel consumption units, we give it the exact pick list values, and for any numbers, we tell it what decimal place to use. So you want to be deliberate and that how it extracts and the instructions you give it to extract the data. So this is the instruction on what we're extracting and how we want it formatted. And then if we scroll down to the bottom, very similar to what we saw in the utility bill sorter, we also tell it, here is the exact format we want it output in, the output schema, that JSON structure that we want, that the Apex is expecting. So we have all of our fields plus our confidence fields, and then we tell it explicitly, do not provide anything but the JSON. We don't need a paragraph about what your thought process or what have you. We just need this JSON because we're just going to use that in our extraction. So once again, assuming that prompt is successful, we will once again create, parse that data, create the SAEU, and then it will all get returned back to our primary screen flow with the success screen that we saw here. A lot of information, I definitely understand, but the principle or the pattern is the same regardless of path. We want to classify the document, we want to extract the data, we want to parse it to put it into a rigid structure, and then we want to create the record or commit it to the database. So that is the demonstration and what I was planning to cover today. I'll skip back to some principles just to think about while we're synthesizing the demonstration, what have you. But at this point, open to hearing any questions, thoughts, concerns from the audience here. Hoping this was helpful to the team. Dan, Morgan, any thoughts or comments from your end?
No, I think you've covered everything fairly well. Again, open to if there's any questions that folks have, or if they're wanting to connect more on a one-on-one basis to dive into things a little bit deeper. We're certainly available to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, this is certainly a general approach, and I think it is, it can definitely handle a large majority of use cases. But for example, we've got customers that have custom fuel types that get fertilizer bills or what have you. You would, if you're wanting to process different types of data, we would certainly be open to hearing what your use cases are and figuring out how we can tailor this process to your needs. So
looks like we do have one question in the Q&A from Shankar.
take a look at that. Does the JSON output get stored in any Salesforce object to extract data for reporting? Yeah, so the JSON output is stored in that log object. Here we go. So it is stored in the raw extract JSON field of the document processing log object. So yeah, if you wanted to pull that out, either for reporting, or if you wanted to pull it into some other database and it's easier for you to extract JSON, you could certainly, instead of query a REST API, you could certainly pull it from there. And once again, this JSON is the exact format we give it. If you wanted to capture additional data or in a different format or what have you, you're in control of it because you are defining that schema in the, jumping around a little bit, but you are defining it here in the prompt itself. So hopefully that answers the question. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns? Right. Well, once again, we appreciate everyone's time, attendance, and thought. This is, an exciting space, an emerging space, and we're really excited about this use case. We know that many of our customers are looking for automated data collection, data ingestion tools, and we really feel like this process kind of fits that bill. So once again, if you have any questions or thoughts as you synthesize around this after the call, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can certainly help you think through this process. Otherwise, I appreciate the time and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.